We will work with any nation that respects our sovereignty and truly supports the health of our people. Our partnerships are not about ideology, they are about protecting the lives of Burkinabe citizens first.
In February 2026, something big happened off the coast of Ivory Coast. The Italian energy company Eni announced that it had discovered around 5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 450 million barrels of condensate under the sea. That is not a small number. That is the kind of discovery that can change the future of a country. In the same week, Angola also confirmed a major oil discovery in Block 156, adding hundreds of millions of barrels of oil near existing facilities, which means production could start faster than usual. When two African countries discover this much energy in 1 week, it is not just business news, it is geopolitical news. Energy means money, energy means power, and energy means influence. Europe is watching closely because it needs new gas supplies, and China is watching because it already invests heavily in African energy. The big question is not just how much oil and gas was found, but who will truly benefit from it. Will the money build schools, hospitals, roads, and factories in Africa, or will most of the profit flow back to foreign shareholders? History shows both outcomes are possible. This moment could be a turning point, but only if leaders negotiate strong contracts and manage the revenue wisely. Otherwise, it may become another story where Africa supplies the resources and others take the biggest rewards. Ivory Coast is already one of Africa's strongest economies and one of the world's largest cocoa producers, while Angola has been producing oil for decades. On paper, both countries are resource-rich, but when you look deeper, you see a painful truth. Being rich in natural resources does not automatically make a country wealthy. Angola has earned billions from oil over the past 30 years, yet many citizens still struggle with poverty, unemployment, and weak public services. This is often called the resource curse. It happens when a country depends too much on oil or minerals and fails to build strong institutions, industries, and transparent systems. Money comes in, but it does not spread evenly. Corruption can grow, local industries can weaken, and jobs may not expand enough. The same risk exists now for Ivory Coast. Finding gas is exciting, but managing the revenue is the real test. If leaders invest wisely in education, healthcare, manufacturing, and infrastructure, the country can truly transform. If not, the discovery may benefit a small elite while ordinary citizens see little change. Africa, as a continent, holds enormous natural wealth. It has gold, oil, gas, cobalt, diamonds, and fertile land. Yet many countries still rely on foreign aid. That contradiction shows that the issue is not a lack of resources, but how systems are structured and how power is negotiated globally. Real development comes when resources are used to build long-term strength, not short-term spending. Energy is never just about business. It is always about strategy. Since the Russia-Ukraine war, Europe has been searching for new energy partners. For many years, European countries depended heavily on Russian gas, and when the war disrupted that supply, Europe had to move quickly. African gas suddenly became extremely important. That is why discoveries in Ivory Coast and Angola matter far beyond Africa. They could help Europe secure stable energy and reduce dependence on Russia. At the same time, China is deeply invested across Africa, with Chinese companies already operating in Angola's oil sector and holding mining contracts in many countries. For China, African energy supports its massive industrial economy. Now major global powers are watching the same region, creating both opportunity and competition. African countries can use this moment to negotiate better deals, because when multiple powerful buyers want your resources, you gain leverage. But leverage only works if leaders act strategically. If contracts are rushed or poorly negotiated, long-term value can be lost. Energy today is like gold in the ground. giving countries bargaining power in international politics. The question is whether African governments will use that power to strengthen their economies, or whether external actors will shape the outcome to serve their own national interests first. One of the most important developments this week was not just about oil, but about financing. The African Export-Import Bank, also known as a Frexim Bank, recently financed a $100 million energy project within Africa. That may sound small compared to trillion cubic foot gas discoveries, but it represents something powerful. For decades, African energy projects have largely depended on Western banks, European investors, or Chinese state financing. When outsiders provide the money, they often shape the terms, influence contracts, repayment conditions, and sometimes even political decisions. But when African institutions finance African projects, the balance changes. The continent keeps more control, profits can circulate locally, and decisions can reflect regional priorities instead of foreign shareholder expectations. This is how true sovereignty begins, not with speeches but with financial capacity. If African banks grow stronger and fund more large-scale projects, countries will negotiate from a position of strength. They will not just be sellers of raw resources, but strategic players. Building this kind of internal financial muscle takes time and requires transparency, trust, and strong governance. But it is possible. This model shows that Africa does not only have natural resources, it is also building institutions that can turn those resources into lasting economic power. In late February 2026, Iran's defense minister met with officials in Burkina Faso. On the surface, it looked like a simple diplomatic meeting, but in global politics, such meetings are rarely simple. Iran is a country under heavy international sanctions, which limit its ability to trade and access the global financial system, so it looks for alternative partners. West Africa, especially the Sahel region, offers new opportunities. Countries like Burkina Faso and Mali are rich in gold, which is extremely valuable because it can be traded outside the traditional banking system. For Iran, building defense ties in the Sahel may open doors for trade, influence, and strategic positioning. Iran presents itself as a supporter of anti-colonial movements and sovereignty, a message that can be attractive in countries that feel abandoned or pressured by Western governments. But behind every partnership there are interests. Iran wants allies, trade routes, and leverage. For Burkina Faso, the calculation may be simple. If Western partners reduce military support, leaders look elsewhere. Security threats from insurgent groups are real and dangerous. When a country faces daily violence, ideology often becomes secondary to survival. So, Iran's growing presence in the region is not random. It is part of a bigger global shift where new alliances are forming outside traditional Western influence. The Sahel is slowly becoming a strategic crossroads where global powers compete quietly but seriously. At the center of this story is Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré. Under his leadership, the country has changed direction quickly. France was pushed out. Military ties with Western partners were reduced. Russia increased its presence by offering training and military support, and Iran opened defense discussions. Yet in the same week, Burkina Faso signed a 5-year health cooperation agreement with the United States worth $127 million. At first glance, this looks contradictory. How can a country publicly call Russia a strategic ally and still accept American funding? The answer is strategy. Small and mid-sized countries often survive by balancing powerful players against each other. During the Cold War, many nations did this successfully, receiving support from both the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, Burkina Faso may be attempting something similar. The country faces serious security threats and a humanitarian crisis. Millions lack access to health care, and hundreds of health facilities are not functioning because of conflict. In that situation, Rejecting health aid would hurt citizens more than politicians. So the government appears to be separating ideology from practical needs. Military support can come from one partner, health funding from another, and trade from somewhere else. This approach is risky, but it can also increase bargaining power. The challenge is managing these relationships without becoming dependent on any single power. Whenever Burkina Faso talks about sovereignty, one historical figure appears again and again: Thomas Sankara. Sankara led the country in the 1980s and became famous for his strong anti-colonial message. He believed Africa should feed itself, produce for itself, and depend on no one. One of his most powerful ideas was simple: "He who feeds you controls you." That sentence still shapes political conversations today. Current leaders often reference Sankara when speaking about independence and dignity. But here is the difficult question: can a country truly claim independence while accepting arms from one foreign power and health money from another? Sankara's vision was not just about rejecting foreign influence. It was about building internal capacity. That means strong agriculture, local manufacturing, national industries, and self-sufficient health systems. It means training doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs at home, and reducing the need for outside funding over time. The reality today is complicated. Burkina Faso faces insecurity and economic pressure, and building self-reliance takes years, sometimes decades. So leaders may argue that temporary partnerships are necessary. But the tension remains. True sovereignty is not about choosing new allies. It is about reducing the need for allies in essential sectors. That is the standard Sankara set, and it is a very high one. When you step back and look at everything together, a clear theme appears. This week's events are not just about oil discoveries, defense meetings, or health aid packages. They are about leverage. Africa has enormous natural wealth, including oil, gas, gold, fertile land, and a young population of over 1.4 billion people. Demographically, it is the youngest continent on Earth, and that alone represents future economic power. But raw assets do not automatically create influence. Influence comes from institutions, financial systems, strong governance, and coordinated strategy. When African banks finance African projects, leverage increases. When local industries process resources instead of exporting them raw, leverage increases. When countries build strong regional trade networks, leverage increases. The map of global power is slowly changing. Traditional Western dominance is being challenged by Russia, China, and other emerging players. In this shifting environment, Africa has options. Options create negotiating strength, but they must be managed carefully. If leaders play global powers against each other wisely, they can extract benefits and strengthen their countries. If they miscalculate, they risk new forms of dependency. The real story, therefore, is not who is offering money or weapons. The real story is who controls the terms, and that is where the future of the continent will be decided. On February 25, 2026, just days after Burkina Faso strengthened ties with Russia and held defense talks with Iran, the United States signed a 5-year health cooperation deal worth $147 million with the country. For many observers, this looked surprising. How can a government that publicly distances itself from Western military influence still accept American funding? The answer is simple and practical. Health is different from politics. When millions of people lack access to basic health care, leaders cannot afford to reject support that saves lives. In Burkina Faso, conflict has damaged hundreds of health facilities, and many communities struggle with malaria, HIV, and other preventable diseases. In that situation, health aid is not about ideology. It is about survival. For the United States, this is also strategic. Military influence in the Sahel has reduced in recent years. So health diplomacy becomes one of the few tools that still builds goodwill. When a country funds hospitals, medicine, and disease prevention, it builds soft power, keeps communication channels open, and maintains relevance in a region that is geopolitically important because of its location near the Sahara and the Gulf of Guinea. This is not charity alone. It is calculated engagement. What we are seeing is a new kind of competition, not just about guns and oil, but also about hospitals and public health programs. Burkina Faso may criticize Western policies, but it still accepts practical cooperation. This shows that modern geopolitics is rarely black and white. Countries can disagree in one area and cooperate in another. Health funding becomes a bridge, keeping relationships alive even when military ties fade.